Union Free School District Board of Education meeting for December 8th, 2020. District Clerk, please note that all trustees are present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, item 3C is our reading of our district's mission statement. Trustee Riegstad is going to do that for us this month.
All right, our board and district vision is to create a community that creates dynamic learners who possess social awareness, confidence, and a belief in their power to succeed. Our mission statement: the Kenton school community will provide our students with the supports, tools, and diverse opportunities needed to meet the challenges of an ever-changing world. And our values are mutual respect, independence, trust, teamwork, integrity, passion for excellence, and responsibility.
Thank you, Dr. Riegstad. Okay, item 4A is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved by Leslie. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Andrew. Is there any discussion? There being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Next is the approval of the minutes from November 10th, 2020 regular Board of Education meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved by Jen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tom. Any discussion? Okay, there being none. All those in favor so signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 5A, our public comments. I'll read our policy for public comments first. We do have some public comments this evening. Public comments during virtual meetings. At our virtual Board of Education meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic, members of the public wishing to participate in public comment portion of the meeting will have the opportunity of submitting a video recording or a written submission. All public comments, whether a video recording or a written submission, must adhere to the Kenton School District's guidelines for public comment. Any comments that violate these guidelines will be excluded. Please note the following. Written submissions and video submissions must include the individual's name and address. Video submissions will be limited to 3 minutes. Any videos exceeding 3 minutes in length will be ended after the 3 minutes have passed. Public comments cannot include charges or complaints against individual district employees or board members. No reference to specific individuals. Public comments cannot include defamatory, abusive, or vulgar language. To submit a comment in writing, members of the public may use the chat feature in YouTube Live or email their comment to pfinelli@ktufsd.org. These comments will be compiled in a publicly accessible document. Comments must be submitted prior to the public comment portion of the meeting. To submit a video, send that video to pfinelli@ktufsd.org. You will be contacted if there's any technical difficulties with the video file that you provided. Videos will be played during the public comment portion of the meeting. Videos must be submitted no later than 12 p.m. the day of the meeting. Those instructions or that policy is spelled out in our website. If you go to the Kenton website and the Board of Education page, it's under the tab for board meeting live stream. You can find that, what I just read there. As I said, we do have 3 comments, I believe, this evening. The first one is a video that was submitted, and that was submitted by Mrs. Jessica Bombrow, who resides at 172 Southwood Drive. We can play that now.
Public comments, Jessica Brumbaugh, 172 Southwood Drive, Buffalo, New York, 14223. 270 days. 270 days is the approximate amount of time since my daughter has been in a classroom. We are coming up on 1 full year of no in-person instruction. If I was a teacher, I would give this administration an F on how they have handled the reopening of schools. I understand the situation has been complicated the past couple weeks with testing requirements. It was less complicated in September when all of our kids, K through 12, should have started hybrid learning. They could have had 1 full quarter of in-person instruction before we found ourselves in the current situation. In the first quarter of this school year at Kenmore West, where my daughter attends, 34% of students failed 1 or more classes. That's an increase of 15% from last year. There are the statistics that show you full remote instruction is not working. You care a lot about enrollment, and I will tell you that you already lost my son coming back the next school year. I'm keeping him in private where he has had only 2 days of remote instruction so far this school year. If you don't open up schools now, watch your next year's enrollment sink even farther as families look elsewhere to enroll their children. I'm asking the Board of Education and our superintendent to open schools now. No more delays, no more excuses, no more we can't do it. I'm asking that all grades, K through 12, are brought back now. The phased-in approach is no longer an option. We can't waste any more time getting our kids back into the classroom. They know how to behave and wear a mask since they've been doing it since March. They wear a mask better than some adults. I attended a rally this past weekend downtown with lots of parents, teachers, and families that are as passionate as me in seeing schools open. We are growing stronger, and we will no longer put up with you doing whatever you want and keeping our kids out of school. Kenton has definitely been called out and will continue to be for not reopening our schools. Instead of writing to legislators asking for money back for PPE expenditures, write to them about getting schools open. If the state mandates are restricting in-person learning, address that instead. You are the leaders of our district, and we expect you to advocate for our children. Follow the science and not the fear. This is not about us adults. This is about our kids. Our hearts should be breaking with what is happening with our children being out of school for almost a year. I hope you take my comments into consideration, not for me, but for my daughter and the children of Kenton. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Mrs. Brumbaugh. We have 2 more individuals that have submitted comments. Mr. Jeremiah Daybold, who resides at 291 Hampton Parkway, and Ms. Leah Steinhardt, who resides at 146 Dalton Drive. The board has those comments in hand, and they can be accessed by the public on YouTube live chat, chat link. Sorry, if you would like to read those. Again, thank you to both Mr. Daybold and Ms. Steinhardt for your comments. Okay, item 6A are the Board of Education committee reports. I'll go through our list, and if your committee has met this month and you have something to tell about, jump right in. We have our Audit and Finance Committee. I know they met last night. Tom and I attended, and I think Tom's got a report for that.
Thanks, Matt. As you just mentioned, the Audit Advisory Committee met last night. And Assistant Superintendent Marasco reported that the State Comptroller audit report looked at 2 areas and at the 2014 capital project. Next at the meeting, a representative from Drescher and Malecki provided an update on their 2020-2021 internal audit. For the first cycle of the additional detail testing of their internal audit, capital assets was selected. Their field work has been completed, and a draft is being reviewed in-house and will be ready for us to look at early next year. The committee also received a preliminary look at that draft's results, which includes a handful, I think maybe 7 recommendations, none of them considered urgent. Then the committee discussed a possible area for the second cycle to focus on. And after we considered several possibilities, we approved payroll personnel as the area to get a more thorough run through. Payroll personnel, of course, is a large, complex area and hasn't been done in 4 years. I don't know if you have anything to add, Matt, but that's
No, I think you
notes.
pretty much covered it. Okay, how about our Board of Education Policy Subcommittee? Anything there? Okay, the ECASB Delegate Assembly. They haven't met this month. How about the ECASB, I'm sorry, the Staff Development Policy Board? I attended that meeting and Trustee Battaglia, I know, attended that meeting and has some, but I'll start with my portion. A big portion of the meeting was spent on reviewing proposed course offerings for the spring and making sure that the number of hours being proposed are aligned with the course content. Due to COVID, obviously, the courses this spring are pretty much all online. And as a result, some new policies were set. 3 new policies actually were being set. One was that an instructor's pay scale, a new instructor pay scale was put in place where the number of participants in a course will determine the amount per hour that instructor is paid. That's a change from previous years. Secondly, that instructors are being asked to, in some cases, increase their maximum number of participants in courses. Some that were at 12 are being asked to increase to 15, for example. If there are 2 instructors for a course, they're being asked to increase to 30, up from, I think, 20. And then the last thing they talked about as far as changes was that online work expectations, that all instructors who teach online will remind participants that assigned work and posts should be done and completed outside of the workday. Those are basically the things that were covered in the meeting. I know Trustee Taglia has some information about the financial piece.
Yeah, I do. I'd been in contact with Elaine Adlov, and actually that was part of what I sent on to our new legislators. But teacher center funding has been threatened in the new budget, and teacher centers are required by law to be led by teachers. And in the last 2 years, the Teacher Center has been able to offer certification for special ed teachers, pre-K and K, 7, 8, 10 through 12 teachers. They offer a wide variety of courses, not only for teachers, but also for staff. I was particularly interested in the one they reviewed on, I believe it is snowplow repair for our building and grounds staff. I think the important thing is that this Teacher Center has been advised that 80% of their first quarter grant payment will be coming in, but it's not a sufficient sum when teacher centers are needed to provide essential workshops, especially workshops in all of the new technology that teachers are being required to perform. So I made sure to highlight this and a few other pieces of information to the new legislators who'll be taking their seats in January in an email that I sent to them. So just a little bit of extra information regarding teachers.
Thank you, Leslie. All right, the ECASB legislative team, anything there?
Yep, that's me. So I attended the ECASB legislative breakfast on November 14th. And at that breakfast, it was a virtual breakfast. We met with the newly elected assembly members, Bill Conrad and John Rivera, and the legislative assistant to newly elected Senator-elect Sean Ryan. The goal was to sort of bring the newly elected legislators up to board with educational issues. We discussed the digital divide, both rural, suburban, and urban digital divide. The legislators suggested that it is, there's honestly the incentives to companies to maybe expand broadband would be suggested. They had a number of suggestions that they provided. The next question that was brought up was on the transportation reimbursement issue, the fact that we were not going to be reimbursed for the cost of transportation from March until June. They made the legislators, the newly elected legislators, aware of that information. There was some talk about advocacy during times of being in an orange and red zone. And the ECASB is intending on setting up virtual meetings with our legislators, probably after the first of the year, after they've all taken their offices. And then I attended the legislative team committee meeting on November 19th as well. We reviewed, mostly it was a review of the breakfast and the Albany update that I think Jen attended. And we discussed what was going on in districts. And again, scheduling those meetings. Coupled with that, there was a bit of a push to write to our legislators. So I did write a letter on behalf of the board to Brian Higgins. I highlighted a lot of the costs that the district is encumbering. And I want to thank Nicole for the information that you provided me for the letter. And I also highlighted some information about the yellow and orange zones to Representative Higgins, since the federal government is discussing a stimulus and state and local aid, especially to school districts, is still on the table. I read an article about it yesterday. Still not sure if that's going to make it into the bill or not. And I forwarded the letter that I sent to Representative Higgins on to our new legislators. I have heard back from Bill Conrad. He thanked me for our letter, and he's the only one I've heard back from thus far. And that's my report.
Thank you. All right, the Family Support Center, any meeting there? No. How about the SAVE Committee? Technology? The Wellness Committee? No. The only other thing is that I'm on that, actually, Trustee Morrow and I represent the district on the Tonawanda Community Working Group. If you remember last month, we talked about this being a group that was put together to oversee the cleanup of the former Tonawanda Coke site. They held their second meeting back on December 3rd. And, the group's not a decision-making body, but it's there to help make recommendations. And as I mentioned last month, there's an excellent website where you can access the detailed plans of the project. And that website can be accessed at riverviewtechcampus.com. Following a discussion at the meeting, following a discussion of updating some bylaws, there were a couple of presentations to update the group on the progress of the cleanup. They said that thanks to the favorable weather we've had this fall, that things are moving along nicely. Soil and water samples have been taken and are being analyzed at this time, and the early data is beginning to come back. So there wasn't a lot to report yet, but things are moving along pretty quickly, they thought. There's also two contractors that are on site that are doing asbestos abatement, which needs to be done prior to being to the demolition of some of the structures that are on the site also. And then we'll meet again in January, and hopefully by then have more information about the testing that is going on. Okay, any other thing on committees? Before we move forward.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention, Matt, that I also attended the virtual legislative breakfast. I think Jen may have as well.
No.
Oh, okay, just us. And I wanted to echo what Leslie said about the discussion of the digital divide. I was heartened by the two new assemblymen and the aide for Senator Ryan's awareness of the lack of accessibility that's somewhat widespread in pockets around the area for students. They told stories of students who that they know who have to go to picnic tables outside libraries or hang out in parking lots at Tim Hortons to get Wi-Fi. And then something that never occurred to me, that there are some teachers who live in rural areas and have to teach by using their phones because there's no service, in their residences.
Mm.
And I also wanted to mention that last Wednesday, I attended a NYSBA webinar on institutional racism, raising awareness, and meeting the needs of all students. And it was excellent. There were 3 panelists, Dr. Anil Alston, who calls himself Dr. A. He's with the State Ed Department and serves as Assistant Commissioner of the Office of Access, Equity, and Community Engagement. The second panelist was Dr. James Montesano, Superintendent of NIAC Schools, which is just outside of New York City along the Hudson, I think. And Karen Hughes was the third panelist. She is a school board trustee in the NIAC district. They discussed NIAC's efforts over the last couple of years to sensitize their district and their community to equity issues and to follow what they called a moral imperative to educate all students, all in caps. And through the couple of years, NIAC has methodically found ways to change attitudes and policies. And a critical first step in NIAC's journey was a professional development opportunity for the school board and their cabinet to educate themselves. They signed up for a 2.5-day workshop called Undoing Racism. And once that workshop was completed and initial difficult discussions of implicit racism were held, the district began trying to gradually fix the system. They've updated their own resolution, the board has in NIAC, on equity, inclusion, and diversity. They've developed a racial equity plan. None of it has happened overnight, and there are, small steps forward. And the official from the State Ed Department who participated said that the State Ed Department and his office especially supports initiatives like that, and that they have several models on hand of school districts in addition to NIACs around the state. And you might recall at the last board meeting, I reported on my participation in the NYSBA virtual convention, especially sessions on equity. And I'd like to keep plugging away at sometime beginning our own courageous conversations, if you will, about race, and have us consider perhaps composing an appropriate resolution sometime. And maybe a starting point would even be to have us register for that Undoing Racism workshop that is sponsored by an organization called, with the acronym PISE. And I sent out to my colleagues on the board the website so you could explore what the workshop entails. And I look forward to further conversations. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
I had one comment update that I wanted to give too. I attended the Albany update on November 12th. President Chimera and Superintendent Samato attended also. It was a virtual meeting. David Little was the speaker, and it was just an update about what's going on in Albany since the election. And it's interesting, the topic of broadband accessibility came up, and his statement was that, and I wrote it down because I thought it was very interesting, the state should have the social responsibility for establishing adequate broadband for all of the students across the state. And I thought that the social responsibility was a great term. But generally his key points were that he's hoping that with the Biden presidency that we'll see more additional education funding, a shift away from privatizing public education. He thought that New York State could make cuts in other areas rather than the 20% education funding cuts that have been proposed. He also stated that he thought that as far as talking to legislators, that it would mean more coming from parents and community members rather than school board officials or district employees. He said we just need to keep plugging away and get through this pandemic. And I thought the one last comment that again was kind of interesting was that we have to remember that the Roaring 20s came right after the 1918 flu pandemic, and right after that the economy surged. So kind of like a hopeful way to end, you know, that we can make it through and maybe something good will be on the other side. So those were just the key points that I took away from that meeting.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other board comments? Okay, then we'll go to item 6C, which is our student representative report. I'll turn it over to Lauren Reinhardt and Kendall Brock for their report. Ladies.
Great, thank you so much. Really quick, I'm gonna pull up a quick visual that'll kind of guide what Kendall and I have to talk about today. Okay, so first off, I just want to introduce myself again. My name is Lauren Reinhardt, and I'm a senior at Kenmore East, and I am the student rep on the Board of Education for Kenmore East. So this diagram is just kind of an outline of the student leadership initiative that Kendall and I, or my partner Kendall and I, introduced at last month's board meeting. So tonight we just kind of wanted to give an update about where we are in the process and what's been going on our end of things. So basically, after the last board meeting, we shared our Google Form nomination with all the building principals, and they were able to get it out to their staff. So we're still in the nomination process. Lots of nominations are coming in. Staff have been really great, like really receptive at all 5 buildings. So that's been great. And we've been in contact with each of the building principals and kind of set up our plan as to each building specific, like what needs to be done and everything to help our process. So yeah, overall, it's been really great. And Kendall's going to tell us a little more about what the next step in the process is and how we're working with the principals and everything.
So I'm Kendall Brock. I'm a senior at Kenmore West. And as Lauren said, we've already contacted each of the building principals individually. Some of them have meeting dates set up with us already, so we can go ahead and help them pick the nominees for the PLC. And we hope to get their meetings with their students done relatively soon, hopefully right after Christmas break or right before Christmas break, if that's possible. Some schools are a little farther ahead than others, but we hope to have everybody in the same spot by the end of January. So with about one of the PLC meetings underway, and yeah, so we're just really excited about where it's going.
Great job, girls. Again, I know the work you're putting into this, and again, I'm looking very forward to seeing this come to fruition and be able to work with this group. But you're doing a terrific job. Keep it up. Okay, brings us up to item 7, our superintendent's report. Superintendent Samato, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, President Chimera. And just to comment on some of the reports that were just given. First, our young women, Lauren and Kendall, very proud of you. You are exemplars of the best that Kenton has within our student body. You're doing an excellent job, and your legacy that you're going to leave in this new leadership initiative like that we've talked about before, it's wonderful. So great job. Keep up the great work, girls, and keep pushing forward. You're doing great work. To our board members, the one comment that I did want to make, Dr. Riegstad, and thank you very much for continuing to keep our focus on equity and also our cultural awareness. I know that not me taking credit for it. I know that this has been something that Kenton has wanted to look at and dive deeper into for a while. As we mentioned before, over the summer, even in the midst of the pandemic and trying to get schools going for the school year. Our administrators had a great presentation by Miss Ursi Bankhead from UB, I believe, correct, Lisa Cross? I know I'm remembering this off the cuff right now, but and
she has a private practice but does consult with UB, yes.
okay, great. So and that was just the tip of the iceberg. And a lot more work does have to come forward and move forward. So we applaud your thinking there and look forward to moving forward as a district with digging deeper into this work. Today, the update, a few updates. There's, of course, the biggest update. What are we doing with schools? We'll get to that in just one moment. I just want to, the first update I want to give is that our parent cabinet also met since our last meeting. That was the second meeting, since our last board meeting. That was the second parent cabinet meeting that we've had. And the parents, I really want to commend those parents. Sometimes I've been told I can be a talker, and they sat through a long update with me that evening. But the wonderful thing about it is that they're very, very respectful and they give feedback. One of the things that we shared, and I'll continue to share in Kenton, and as we all continue to get to know each other during this first year of the tremendous work that we're doing together, is that I always welcome feedback. I always welcome opinions that differ from our plan, from how we proceed, and even from my core, because when we hear each other, it keeps our thinking fresh and it points us in a direction of staying open-minded. As soon as we put the blinders on, we lose focus on our critical thinking and potentially coming up with an even better plan. So I shared with the parent cabinet that evening that I really always encourage families and parents to share with their principals. Their principals always share it with us. You could even share it with us in different forums. The only time that you'll ever see me become silent is kind of how Mr. Chimera started the comment section this evening. In my opinion, there's never room for anyone to be rude to each other. And we don't want to establish that type of culture in Kenton. Disagreement is one thing, disrespectful is another. I want, and that's between parents, that's between students, that's student to teacher, that's teacher to student, that's teacher to teacher. It goes cabinet to cabinet, it goes across the board. So as you get to know me more, that's really the only time that I won't entertain hearing differing of opinion is when people are purposely hurtful and insulting. So with that being said, we got to hear a lot of great differing opinions that night. And we continue to hear it from our families, from our staff. And it's been wonderful. It helps to continue to shape us. What I'm going to share with you this morning is our best thinking around what is going on right now during this pandemic and how we're going to move forward as a district. I shared on Friday, I delayed giving an update on Friday when I gave the weekly connection update this past Friday. There was not new guidance yet by the governor. If everybody remembers correctly, the governor last Monday, a week ago yesterday, did a report on the television and said that the requirements under orange and red zones were going to change. And he outlined those changes. He had about 3 slides, if I'm remembering correctly, during that presentation. And what I shared with the community this past Friday is that we could not act on those slides until we received new guidance in writing. Well, no sooner than I sent that weekly connection out Friday night, some new guidance came out Friday evening. So, but we welcome that. That's just, and that's not an insult or a downfall of anybody in our state. There's a lot going on right now between the pandemic and between budgets and new elections and trying to move the state forward and the nation forward. There's a lot going on. So we're just happy that we received that guidance. But with that guidance, we looked at everything that was in writing because we still had a lot of questions that were out there. Some questions that I shared, high level questions, I'll tell you right now. Just to recap from Friday, what were the testing requirements? What were going to be the testing requirements just to go back? Were they different than what the governor had mentioned on Monday? Was there a certain pattern or a certain number that we had to do each week? So that's just a sample, but we need to see that type of really guidance, drilled down guidance in writing. And we received that. So I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint. Hang on one moment. Let me, I'm usually better than this at this. So let me, let me bring this up. And then give me a thumbs up if you can see the PowerPoint now on your screen. Okay, I'm going to start the slideshow from the beginning. And okay, and hold on just one moment because it's showing something separate here on the right-hand side, and I'm confused why it's doing that. But we'll focus on the main slide here that we see. So this slide just gives you some background. It's entitled Student and Staff Health and Safety, and I'm going to give you kind of some background for the first few slides here. Some data. Dr. Robert Redfield, CDC Director, recently cited a growing body of evidence, including the CDC's own observational reports, that shows virus is not spreading to a significant extent in K through 12 classrooms. And folks, I normally do not like reading off PowerPoints, but some of these slides have very pertinent information and we have to hit these points. So please bear with me. So that goes into some background. Virus not spreading to a significant extent. We heard our governor say that. Our governor even had a guest speaker, Dr. Fauci. I believe the days are kind of running into each other here, but I believe Dr. Fauci was on with the governor yesterday and indicated that is what the growing data nationally is showing, that schools are one of the safest places to be. An ongoing analysis by researchers from Brown University, COVID-19 not spreading in high levels in K through 12 schools during instruction. Kenton schools are following all New York State requirements and have implemented extensive safety, cleaning, and sanitation procedures. So folks, just to reiterate, remember our delay in the beginning of the year, I had some concerns. And I stated very clearly in our weekly connections, we were so ready to move forward. We were even moving forward with accelerating our timeline before we hit yellow and orange zones. So if you remember back in October, then we got to the beginning of November, we had announced that we were going to be moving forward and even speeding things up. So we know and we're confident in our staff. We're confident in our teachers and our administrators. We're confident in our B&G staff that we have everything in place and that we're ready. We've felt that way before this yellow and orange zone designation. Contact tracing, I know that has come up as a concern and something that we implemented that I just wanted to reiterate. I believe I shared it last month with the board. We, as a district, have instituted our own procedure that in the event that we are notified of a confirmed COVID-19 in our schools, okay, we take a proactive approach to contact tracing. So a lot of places, because this is the protocol, you wait for the CDC to the Center for Disease Control, or I'm sorry, not the CDC, the Erie County Department of Health, to reach out and then tell the people that may have been exposed that they are a contact and they may have to quarantine, and they go through the whole procedure of doing that. as a district, we are becoming very fluent in our understanding, and we have procedures in place where we indicate proactively to people as soon as we find out about the case that they should remain at home and quarantine until they hear from either us or the CDC. Now, the purpose of that procedure is in the event that like the concerns that have been raised recently with CDC ever being overwhelmed, or I'm sorry, I keep on saying CDC, Erie County Department of Health ever being overwhelmed with the contact tracing. We are not overwhelmed with the contact tracing. Of course, it's a challenge, but we tell people right away and we advise people. So that's on a proactive measure, and we take proactive measures to make sure that we're keeping our schools the safest that we could possibly keep them. Here's just a little bit about our cleaning and disinfecting. Just to recap, partnering with Hilliard, I've used this and referenced this in our weekly connection updates. And we absolutely have developed and implemented an enhanced cleaning and disinfecting plan. We have approximately 70 custodial staff engaged in this cleaning plan. And during the day, staff is engaged in the maintenance and cleaning work that includes wiping down, disinfecting high touch points, and consistently checking, cleaning restrooms every couple hours. We also have a second shift of employees that come in and use some of the most state-of-the-art equipment. Actually, if you remember, before I was ever here, Kenton was featured. I remember seeing this feature on the news that Kenton had some state-of-the-art equipment to battle things like COVID-19, and we've been utilizing that equipment for more than 2 years. The Protexis electrostatic sprayers, advanced type of application throughout our classrooms and facilities. We now have these devices, one for each custodial cleaner at night. So we actually ordered more immediately. It did take a while. They were back ordered. All of those are in, and all of those are in the hands of all of our custodians, and they are cleaning and disinfecting, decontaminating facilities efficiently and effectively. So just to recap where we have been, okay, and where we are. Right now, we're in an orange zone. If you remember back to the beginning of November, we were first moving forward and we got designated in a yellow zone, most of Erie County in a yellow zone. Once again, just to recap, the concern with the yellow zone was not necessarily the number of tests that had to be administered, but it was the fact of who and how were the tests being administered. We had partnered with Erie County in the beginning, Erie County Department of Health, and when the entire region was designated, or most of the region, I should say, as a yellow zone, we were informed that those numbers were just too overwhelming. And now school districts and individual schools would be responsible for figuring out how they were going to test. So that was a huge jump, a huge shift from where we were in the summer when we wrote plans, and where we were even in October, in the beginning when we had heard about these zones in other parts of the state. So from there, we immediately began to get our ducks in a row to apply for a limited service laboratory license. A limited service laboratory license allows school districts, if they have a medical director that signs off on the application, to perform testing in their schools. You cannot order the tests that need to be completed until you have that LSL, limited service laboratory license. So that's an entire process. And once that process goes through, you order the test. Once you get the test, you then get access into a system called Eclairs, which is basically, not to get too much into the weeds, but it's a reporting system for the tests that you are administering. So I hope everybody's following us. This brings us through where we then were in November and December up till now, going through these processes. These processes are not an overnight process, okay? Especially not when you have multiple very large districts, including New York City and other districts applying for LSLs simultaneously. There was a limited capacity at the state level to really dig deeply into evaluating those LSLs. And that, once again, that's not a complaint against the state. That's just where it was, especially with the different zones and the governor's new microcluster initiative. When we first heard about yellow zone, we knew that it was going to be 20% per week, if everybody remembers that correctly. Okay, so 20%, but the difference was at the time, yellow did not indicate that anything needed to be shut down or that it had to be a unique 20%. But we knew that if we got designated as orange or red, that orange or red would lead to an immediate move to virtual, move to remote. Schools needed to be closed to in-person instruction, and then you had to test 100% of students and staff prior to returning. That was the huge challenge. Okay, and that was prior to these new guidance pieces coming out Friday. So what now, that brings us up to speed with where we are here on this slide. Orange zones. Schools need to test 20% of in-person students, staff every month. Every month. That's 10%. And in the guidance it lists, it actually fleshes it out to 10% every 2 weeks. So minimum, maximum 10% random testing every 2 weeks. We're in an orange zone. You notice what was removed was 100% prior to returning, okay? Which it also certain things were removed, such as if people refused to test, then they could not be in the school. That was in the old guidance under an orange zone. It is not in the new guidance that we received. So these, I'm trying to just define for you some of the highlighted changes in some of the information that we received. A red zone, how it's different now. Schools need to test 30% of in-person students and staff every month. That's 15% every 2 weeks. In orange or red zones, there was no option to test out. And what that means is, and there still is no option to test out. I don't see anywhere in the guidance. In the yellow zone guidance, which I'll talk about in a moment, there is an option that when your rate, after you reach a certain amount of testing, if your rate stays lower than the regional rate, that you test out of needing to test. Okay, once again, the premise, the data is showing us, and it's very clear, and I'm in agreement with it, that schools are some of the safest places to be. The rates are not in schools. Dr. Fauci confirmed, our governor has confirmed, the CDC has confirmed, and many people that do this a lot more for a living than I do when it comes to medical have confirmed those findings. But in orange and red zones, there is no testing out. We continue the testing for as long as we're in those zones. But schools are no longer required to close. Testing requirements are the same for all grade levels. That was one of the concerns that we had prior to this guidance coming out, because the governor had made sure to highlight in his Monday speech last week that it was a K-8 in special education, as he defined it. And it almost sounded like that was the initiative. So we had to know where we were able to go with our other grade levels as well, and what that meant for our K-8 and special population. A school must close if our random sampling yields 9 or more positive cases. Now this has stayed there, and this is what the guidance is now. So I want everybody to understand this. If we have 9 or more positive cases in any school, okay, for the sampling size, then we must go back to remote. Okay, we're not saying close where we don't have instruction. We would move back to remote. So that is something to understand that is in the guidance. Remember, we're taking all this into account with our plans and with our planning. Now, where it's size larger than 300, so for example, if your sample size has to go higher than 300, then it's looking at a positivity rate of 3% or more, which might be, in other words, might be more than 9 if your denominator, if your sampling size is higher than 300, if you're following the math of that, okay? If an area transitions down, for example, if we move down from an orange zone to a yellow zone, The testing requirements will go into effect immediately, and that's 20% biweekly. So immediately reading this, we have to understand that the testing requirements in a yellow zone do appear higher than in our orange zone, but the yellow zone, remember, you can test out of having to do further testing. So that's what I'm seeing in this guidance. And if that, I hope that demystifies exactly where we are, the high level of where we are with this guidance, and then how are we going to move forward? Now, this is something that's very important to remember. I started this presentation this evening reminding us of where we were prior to going into yellow. Where we were prior to going into yellow is that we were coming back. We were even accelerating some of our other comeback and how we were coming back to in-person instruction. The only reason why we paused was the testing that was going on. We did not have a concern. It was not on our radar. Of course, infection is always a concern. We're in a pandemic. But the holidays, if you remember, we were approaching Thanksgiving. The holiday was not the focus and was not the concern. Our schools, we knew our procedures were in place and we knew that we were safe. And the question that I want you to understand that was at my core in this decision-making process is if these testing requirements that we see in front of us, the new testing requirements, if these were the testing requirements moving over to orange, would we have ever moved to remote? And I could tell you that the answer would be no. We would have continued. We would have, now the only thing that might have put us into remote is not getting our LSL in a timely enough fashion, not receiving the test in a timely enough fashion. But the requirements that made us go into fully remote was that 100% testing requirement and not having those tests in front of us, okay? We are confident of how we feel of the safety in our schools. Now, folks, with that being said, we can't also be foolish and not understand that we're still in a pandemic. There are going to be situations, we've seen them in the past, even when positivity rates were much lower. We were in a position earlier this year where we went remote for one of our schools for a week and a half because we had a staffing issue, not because staff didn't want to report, but because we had quarantining issues. We had a student issue because we had quarantining issues, not because there was transmission within the school, because, for example, somebody comes in that's infected, going by the guidance, they're in a classroom, and that classroom exceeds 60 minutes, everyone in that classroom must quarantine. It doesn't mean that everyone's automatically infected. It means to mitigate or to reduce the chance of any spread. That's why Erie County Department of Health brings us into a quarantine mode. So I want us to all be familiar with the lingo and where we're at. So sometimes if we're ever put into a position in the future that we would have to go to remote, we might be faced with that. Just like we were prior to being in any zones or prior to being above 5% infection rates or any of that nature. Okay, our schools resoundingly, we know with our procedures in place, are some of the safest places to be right now. And we've heard that from our medical professionals. Okay, with that being said, I bring us to our next slide. Where are we going? Folks, we're going to move forward with bringing kids back to in-person instruction. Okay, we have looked at this very thoroughly. We're going to do it in 2 groups, and I'm going to explain what to expect for the rest of this week. Our first group will come back this coming up Monday, December 14th, and it's going to be all of our elementary schools. It's going to be our grades K through 4, hybrid and special classes. Students will return to school and follow the hybrid schedule. Now, the biggest difference that we've done an about face with is we heard a lot of feedback from our youngest families. Now, folks, we're going to talk about testing, and we're going to talk about testing very deeply on Friday. On Friday, our weekly connection is only going to focus on testing. It's going to have videos. It's going to have procedures. I'm going to walk you through all as a community, as staff to learn exactly what we're going to do with our testing. But for our elementary kiddos, we are not going to be testing during the school day any longer. We're designating Wednesdays, our asynchronous days for now, as testing days for our elementary level. And what we're going to do is that what I'll be rolling out on Friday is the procedure of how we're going to do that. Families, you'll actually have the opportunity to sign up and bring your child to your school for the testing. The testing is very easy, and I'm not saying that to minimize it. You will see that we're going to actually have videos with our own kiddos besides that military gentleman video that I showed you that did it to himself. We're going to actually have a video with our own kiddos. We're going to have a video that brings you through the process and a video that brings you how to sign up for the process. And that is how we're going to obtain our random sampling. The next slide, I'm going to show you exactly what those numbers equate to. And I think your jaws are going to drop with how doable this is. Okay. But parents and guardians for our youngest students, if you remember last week, I indicated that this was where we're focusing on how we're getting our parents and guardians there for our youngest, and this is how we're doing it. So every Wednesday, we will focus at the elementary levels, each elementary school achieving that 5%. Now, am I going to stop at 5? No, we'll probably have enough slots to equate to 7 to 10% for our, for our students. And that's to make sure that we hit the 5, okay? So for those of you who really love math and are going to look at it and say, wait, Samato, you're doing 10% of this school's in person every Wednesday. Yeah, it might be, but that's a case somebody doesn't come to testing. Now, like I said, we're going to really talk a lot about testing, but remember, folks, what this testing is, we are not medical facilities. We are schools. We're accomplishing the testing and we're doing the testing in order to meet the guidance and the mandate of the testing requirement. If students are symptomatic, okay, are showing symptoms of COVID-19, you do not come to your school for a test. You seek your medical professional, you work with Erie County Department of Health, you sign up for a regular COVID test with your medical provider, with any medical provider through Erie County Department of Health. These tests will indicate a positive, okay, and they will work that way, but we should not be coming to our school buildings, okay, if we know that we're symptomatic. That's universal. So if you sign up for a time, and we'll talk about this, like I said, very in depth. I know I'll get flooded with the emails this evening. You have to trust me. We're going to walk you through this, and it will be on our website with how you sign up for the test, what the testing looks like, how you do the test, how you fill out all the information for the test, and it's going to bring you from A to Z. We already have the plan for it. But I want to just be clear and utilize this opportunity to say, you do not come to schools. We do not bring kids to school. Staff do not report to schools if they're symptomatic and they're showing symptoms. Okay, we are not a medical facility. So that is the biggest news for K through 4. 5 through 12 hybrid and special classes, we are going to begin after the break. Now that will begin on Monday. Everyone at one time, 5 through 12, will begin on Monday, January 4th. Testing will actually take place in the schools during the school day for staff and students. At the elementary level, testing will take place during the school day for our staff. We'll have sign-up procedures that will outline also staff on Friday during our demonstration video and our explanation of testing. Once again, Friday's only going to focus on testing. So now the reason for the split, because we are going to bring our youngest back. We are going to look and make sure our capacity, we're going to utilize this time to make sure our nurses are really ready to do all of the testing in all the schools on a large scale. And we're going to take the testing on a smaller scale first, and then we bring the rest of our students back in. Okay, so we're making sure it's almost like a pressure test for us on our testing for Wednesdays, and we'll learn through the process. And we'll make sure that everything is perfect. We have a great set of nurses, folks. They are so dedicated. They are so positive. We're going to be using our nurses from the elementaries on Wednesdays. We're going to be using our nurses from secondaries on Wednesdays. We're also partnering with Supplemental. Supplemental will be helping us in the schools and on Wednesdays. So like I said, I'll roll that all out on Friday. Okay. Some specifics, these last bullets, I just want to hit are some specifics when it comes to everything that I just announced. K through 1, the fully virtual, the VLA students, you continue your remote learning. Those are the students that are staying in remote that signed up for that in the beginning of the year. And folks, we're asking you, you're sticking to what you signed up for earlier in the year. That is what our capacity is, and that's where we're staying right now. Our 2 through 4 VLA students, you will have new dedicated teachers for virtual math and ELA instruction starting on Monday. Now, those teachers, of course, are going to be connecting and reaching out. We are going to make that transition, and you're still going to be connecting at other times with your teachers that you currently have. That's been shared in the plan, and that will continue to be shared by the schools and those procedures with from our directors, Ms. Cross and Mr. Muscarella as well. Okay, but that will start on Monday. The new math and ELA teachers will communicate with families this Friday. Friday, December 18th was originally going to be a half day because that's our first week going back. We've moved that half day, and staff, you'll be receiving more information about that. Staff, that's going to be that's going to be moved to a Wednesday in lieu of that, a Wednesday afternoon. But I want our families to know that that Friday, the 18th, is a full day of instruction for K4. That was originally for K4 a half day of instruction. So that is a change. So in that last bullet, testing procedures, next steps will be detailed. So this next slide, I really want to show you. We only have 2 slides left. Take a deep breath, I promise. I'll have to break for water anyway. But I just want to show you some of these numbers, okay? And what they mean. So just take a minute to really read through this, and then I'm going to take a school and I'm going to drill it down for you. You see that it starts with orange zone, then it moves to red zone, and then it moves to yellow zone. What does a 5, 7.5, and 10 mean? Remember, orange zone is 20% over the month, a minimum maximum of 10% every 2 weeks. Red zone is 30% over the month, a minimum maximum of 15% every 2 weeks. Yellow zone is 10% a week because it's 20% every 2 weeks. In the yellow zone, remember I said yellow is actually a higher testing requirement, even though it's a lesser zone, but you can test out of that yellow zone. Right now we're in orange, so we're focusing on orange, but what do those numbers mean? Okay. When you look at an orange zone and you take, let's take our largest one. That's Kenmore West. And I'm just picking on Kenmore West because you can see that they have the number 51. It's kind of glaring. Folks, that is 51 tests of students per week in order to meet the requirement of doing our testing of in-person students. You divide that by 4, you see where I'm going. This is something at our secondary level that is going to be very doable by site, by day, and especially after our nurses work together with administering these tests over the next 2 Wednesdays together, learning from each other, because some of them have experience administering these tests already. When we're full in-person hybrid instruction, when we come back from the break, that is going to be very doable during the day for our secondary students. Now, you see our Edison Elementary up at the top. On a Wednesday, you see, remember that because that testing is going to be Wednesdays, we will set up hours of the day and we will make sure that we're minimally hitting 22 time slots. So we will be asking families to sign up. Remember, that's not happening now, families. We will absolutely go through that this Friday during the directions and how we're going to do it. and what that looks like for you during Friday's weekly connection, and then we'll cut you loose with the signups. We will do that testing next Wednesday and then the Wednesday before the break. And we will make sure that we hit the testing requirement for our elementaries during these next 2 weeks. And this is just a reminder of what our schedule, that's what I'm closing, just to kind of bring us back to an about face. K through 4 begins December 14th, 5 through 12 begins January 4th. Group A in school on Monday and Tuesdays, while Group B is in school on Thursdays and Fridays. At home on Wednesdays, universally. And we have, based on grade level, that Wednesday looks different. Asynchronous versus some synchronous and asynchronous. Our high school model is a little bit different than our elementary school model. Remember that high schools are logging in on the days that they're not there with the classroom. Elementaries are logging in on that Wednesday, but then they're doing asynchronous on their off school days when we're back into the hybrid. So this week and a half before the break will also give us experience as families going through these schedules and starting to make this the new normal moving forward. And I hesitate calling it the new normal, but that is what we've come to know about this pandemic, is that we have challenges. We know that we're going to have challenges in front of us. We know that we're educators and we need to have students in the school where it is safe. We need to, and of course, we're gonna face challenges together. We will have challenges. I can guarantee you we will have situations of having to quarantine. I want to congratulate our community. Our numbers are going down and we're seeing a consistent rate in our community going down. And sure, are we scared of them going up? Are we afraid of them going up during the holidays? Just as afraid as we will be during this pandemic over every holiday. When we were coming back and we were moving forward, we were approaching Thanksgiving before we entered these zones. So folks, all I can tell you is, as educators, we need to continue to move forward to get our kids into school. We need our kids in school. We know it's going to be a challenge. We know that we'll face adversity. I'm confident in our staff. Our staff, I've seen them now for months in action, for the most part virtually. But one thing that, aside from instruction, I've seen the content of their character. They want their kids. They want to work with their kids. They want to see their kids succeed. And they want to be that instrument that brings their success. So, there's a lot of differing of opinion out there. A lot of us as superintendents, we got together, we've been working together. When I tell you that I've been meeting with area superintendents, I really want to thank them for all of their mentoring, their guidance, and their discussion. I'm not new to administration, but everybody knows I'm newer to the superintendency, and it's nice to have some mentors in that way. Working together, we got to make our thinking audible. We talked through a lot of situations, and you'll notice that a lot of people, a lot of districts, not all, because each district is unique in their own way, but a lot of districts are coming back full on Monday, full hybrid, I should say. Okay. And sure, we're still going to have the conversations, and we still have people out there that think that we should be back full time. Even though the guidance does not allow us to, because we have to maintain that social distancing 6 feet. And there's going to be others that say, Samato, you're crazy. We need to stay remote for the entire year. I promise you, during these choices, during these decisions, folks, we're trying to make the best decisions that we can with the information that is provided. We do not take any of this lightly. And we would not, I'm going to stick to, and I'm going to be very firm with, we would not be coming back if I did not hear from all of our medical professionals, and I did not see the data that schools are a safe place to be. We will always face the risk of quarantine. There will always be a holiday. There will always be something that we're faced with this year. And we have to continue to move that forward, as difficult as it is for all of us. But I'm confident in our staff. I'm confident in our procedures. I know when we have the best. We have the best. I told you when I was afraid that our procedures were not the best. There's nothing that you could accuse me of a lot of things. You're not going to be able to accuse me of not being brutally honest with everyone at all times. Okay, and this is the way, our best thinking moving forward. My decision. I will land on this decision. Nobody else's decision. This is where I'm deciding that as a district, of course, I want to open it up to comments to our board, because I respect all of your thinking. I respect all of your experience. Just please know, I don't want to put our staff, when I say it's my decision, that's not a selfish thing. As your superintendent, I got to be the one that sticks with the decision. Okay, that's why I'm saying my decision. So I hope you can understand that. At this time, President Chimera, before I move on to anything else under my section, if there's any questions or discussion, I'll turn it over to you to lead that, sir. You're muted, Mr. Chimera.
Sorry about that.
That's because, Matt, that's because you were trying to mute me the whole time and you hit your own by mistake.
Any questions or comments?
Can you clarify just a couple of things? Actually, you showed the virtual learning academies at the elementary level, but is that also going to be an option for students at the middle and high school level as well, or will there only be a hybrid option at this point?
So people opted into that, Trustee Gianni, in the beginning of the school year at all levels.
Okay.
It's just more challenging. Full disclosure, it is more challenging at the elementary level, because at the elementary level, it's not just about being able to turn on a camera and watch a lesson. We, if you remember, we did an about face sometime in October, right, Mike Muscarella? I don't even remember what month it is right now, but you know what I mean. We did an about face where we then assigned specific teachers to our VLA in elementary, because we knew that they needed that direct instruction working with a teacher, not a teacher at both places for our elementary earliest learners.
So then are the students who are either full-time remote, or those who are in hybrid, the model for when they are not in the classroom is going to be basically attending in the classroom remotely? Because I know we've looked at a number of different models for what that looks like, and I just wanted to clarify where we landed in terms of what hybrid looks like for those students.
So you're asking what hybrid looks like?
Or what does the remote model look like, right? Because I'm assuming it sounds like you're saying students who are full-time remote as well as students who are hybrid on the days that they are remote will have the same experience.
So there's some words that we gotta, I just want to clarify that we shouldn't use interchangeably. So we have a VLA, which is our Virtual Learning Academy. Virtual Learning Academy are kids that families that have said in the beginning of the school year, no matter what, we are not sending our children back for the first semester. They are staying at home. They are 4 days a week, remote, virtually with their teachers. That's what they're, and plus Wednesdays, they're doing work on Wednesdays, right? But that is, that's their model. Our hybrid at the elementary and our hybrid at secondary is a little bit different. Our hybrid at our elementary, the 2 days they're in school. The third day is a Wednesday where they have literacy instruction and some connection with some assignments with their teachers. And then the other 2 days of the week, they have asynchronous learning. So they have assignments that they're working on, collaborate, of course they can pose questions to their teachers and things of that nature, but it's asynchronous learning. We're at the high school level. There's 2 days that they're there in person as a hybrid. There's one day, that Wednesday, that they're working on, Lisa, help me out, but asynchronous work. And then Thursday and Friday, or the other 2 days, I shouldn't say Thursday and Friday, the other 2 days that they're not there, they're logging into class for the direct instruction part of the lesson, so that those classes continue on that way. Those classes, instead of being broken down into just synchronous and asynchronous, teachers are chunking their lessons to instruction and then group work and then individual work. So depending on the teacher, depending on the class, that's kind of how it goes. I hope that's a 30,000 foot real quick synopsis. I don't want to get too much into the weeds on that today because we have so much ahead of us still with just bringing us back. But that's been in the plan, and that is right, Lisa and Mike. That's in our written plan. That's been shared out. And families, at any time that they have questions about that, they should feel free to call their principal, call their teacher, and the staff is great with really working, because there are, Andrew, to your point, there are a lot of questions that still come along with it because a lot of these people are going to go through it for the first time.
You know what would probably be helpful, and this is just taking a play from my playbook in IT. If you kind of went through and just sort of said, here are the different, we would call them use cases, but like different scenarios, right? I'm a student who does VLA. This is what my week looks like. I'm a student who's hybrid at the elementary school. This is what my week looks like. I'm a student who does hybrid at the high school level. This is what my week looks like. And I think that might be easier, because then they can plug themselves into one of those slots. Instead of having to figure out the logic for themselves, they could just see, this is the vision for what my week looks like after we go back to a hybrid, the hybrid model in general.
Yeah,
So
we'll put our best thinking. We'll put our best thinking around that. We have some things like looms and stuff that are out there now, but we'll put our best thinking around that and try and demystify it even a little bit more. I think it actually, I would probably say that probably 90%, 80 to 90% of it is pretty clear to the user themselves, to the learner themselves. It starts to get a little bit muddier and unclear the more that, as adults, that we're trying to take in all these different models. Like when you live a model, you become used to the model. You know what I mean? So to your point, if people can see all of the different things and what people live through, I think it will be the easiest model that we can have.
Great.
Sure enough.
No, I'll avoid digging into the weeds anymore. I just wanted to, there were some things that I was confused about, and I figured I wouldn't be the only one, so.
Oh, and that, I didn't mean that as an insult, Trustee Gianni.
No, I did not take it that way.
And I totally appreciate it. I just, it's just been, how do we get this going next week? That's, that's been the.
Right on.
I just had a quick question. I also had the same confusion, I guess, and questions that Andrew had. So I was trying to look through the website. My daughter's at Ken West. So I went to the Ken West website and I saw a very detailed plan for the remote model, but I couldn't find any information about what a hybrid model would look like at the high school. So are those plans on the school websites and I just can't find it, or will they be put up there? Because I'm a like visual learner. I need to look at it, and I'm glad we're having the opportunity to ask questions now.
Sure.
But if we can direct parents also to some place to look and read.
Yeah, it's a great question, Trustee Morrow. Lisa, can you just comment a little bit on that and the plans and navigating the plans? And if we need to do some more work this week, tidying some stuff up, then we absolutely will.
Yes, so to both your points, in the school's plans, there is a section on hybrid, but it's in the larger plan. We do have a modified kind of playbook, as you alluded to, Andrew, and that would be posted on the sites as well, where the principals are aware of that, and the teachers are part of training for the hybrid model. They'll have students in front of them and students at home, and students would be logging in on their off days so that they keep that continuity of instruction. Teachers were very eager to keep those 4 days of instruction at the secondary level. So we'll fine tune it, and it will be on the website.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Thank you, Lisa.
I'm sorry. I have a
No, that's
question. So I know you did the orientations for the elementary kids, and I would assume that to some degree those orientations really are taking, like, kind of took care of some of those questions for the parents. There won't be any changes or anything for those parents to have to deal with, given sort of where we're going, correct? Okay. And then my other question, in the high school model, is there, so to some degree, it kind of follows up on Trustee Morrow and Trustee Gianni's question. Is there going to be some sort of orientation? Would teachers maybe in the classroom be providing students, you know, hey, here's what's going to happen when you're now sitting in front of me over the next 2 weeks, so that kids kind of have an expectation of maybe what will happen when they come back on January 4th?
Well, I think, so we talked about that, right, Trustee Battaglia, where we were looking at how do we bring this back in? And look at, I full disclosure, right? I'm going to tell you some things that were at my core with this. If I had a rewind button, and I'm going to Monday morning quarterback myself, I probably would have done our phase in a little bit differently. Okay, for example, I don't know if I would have taken 5 weeks for each piece of the phase. That's me being completely honest. But we learn as we go through this pandemic. And when we were looking at, do we continue to hold off and bring kids back in smaller increments? This is why we decided that this was the smallest increment that we were comfortable with. You know, doing all of elementary, doing all of secondary, because we didn't want to lose any more time. Okay. With that being said, just like, and as a teacher, a lot of us being teachers on this screen, so some of the startups are going to include some of that, right? It's that even though we've had instruction all year, we got to kind of take a step backwards when we come back January 4th and say, okay, this is what you're doing, this is what it looks like, and the teachers will, you know, will go through that, and we'll provide a little bit more guidance. I think, Lisa, you could maybe speak a little bit more about that. But I don't think it's going to be as necessary as the walkthrough that we've had in other places. My biggest concern, in full disclosure, are our 5th graders and our 8th graders. And our 5th graders and our 8th graders, the way that those schools will roll out, I'm sure with the leadership and those teachers, they'll have plans for them on the first day to make sure that they're transitioning back appropriately.
Do you know,
Lisa, anything more for that?
No, I can confirm, and I just was talking to some school leadership teams today. They already had created an orientation plan, some of it including videos, some of it including kind of virtual prior to kids coming back. I know some of our 5th grade teachers had done some of that work in prep for their initial return date. So definitely there's work occurring right now, and then we'll also be communicating to students about that in the next couple of weeks.
do you, the other question I had is, is there an anticipation of using student leadership? I mean, Lauren and Kendall, I would assume you have some sort of, I know in my district it's called Link Crew. I'm not sure if that's what you guys have, but
Yes.
are they going to be used in with the high school students, sort of, especially for the 8th graders, to help them around?
Yes, the student leadership teams have been part of the discussions with the administration throughout this whole process. So they will be part of the discussion and be a big part of the role, especially with our 5th graders and our 8th graders coming into the new buildings.
Thank
Great
you.
ideas. You could tell, Leslie, that you're absolutely a teacher because you're thinking everything through. All of you are, and I really appreciate that. And it keeps us thinking. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Any more questions, comments, concerns
I don't have a
about anything
question,
that I
but I
shared?
guess I just want to take a minute to thank, you know, Superintendent and the cabinet and all the directors and department heads, because this has not been an easy time. You know, I taught in this district for many years. My wife still teaches in the district, so I'm seeing things from both sides right now. And there's for as many parents as you get saying we need to go back, you could probably find just as many parents that are saying they want to be a little cautious about it. So I know these decisions have been difficult, and I know there's been a lot of sleepless nights that have happened. But you know, I want to thank you for all this time and effort that you have put in, and hopefully eventually we're going to get out of this and And we'll look back on it and think, wow, we got through that, and we've learned a lot along the way.
President Chimera, I really appreciate that comment. I know our staff, especially the central office and leadership teachers and administrators that have been working on the plans, I really appreciate that. I'll close this section with exactly how I began, because I'll tell you, today this was going back and forth, right? Like I said to you before, you'll always know me as very honest. What I landed on is two things. Kids, we know that our teachers are that important to have our kids in person for all of our kids, right? We know that about instruction. There's nothing that replaces in-person instruction. And the last thing, and I'll leave you with this, is that if these guidance pieces that are in place right now, and I already said this once during the presentation, if they were in place in the original guidance, we would have never gone to a fully remote to begin with, right? We would have figured this out and got the testing going and kept on moving forward. So ultimately, I know there's going to be people on both sides of the line here, and just understand, we're educators, and we need kids in school, and we're going to keep on fighting as much as we can to always have kids safely in school.
Any other comments? Okay.
Thank you, sir. And I also, sidebar, I want to thank our Board of Education for always listening, hearing, keeping an open mind, and lending perspective to everything from your constituents, which is our constituents, our community. We really do appreciate everything and the teamwork, how this group works together. The last, or the next thing, I shouldn't say the last thing, the next thing that we have on the agenda is you have an action item for the revised district calendar. And all that the difference in there right now, folks, is that since January Regents exams were canceled, the calendar was updated to reflect that. So those are going to be regular school days for our high schoolers. And you'll see that. Now, in the future, we will have, I can almost guarantee that we're going to have another calendar adjustment, just not yet because it hasn't been quite figured out yet. But the governor has recognized Juneteenth as a holiday. It is on the assessment calendar, and we're just figuring out exactly how it's going to look in our calendar, but it is something that we are going to observe as a district. So it's that I'll bring in front of you, I should say, to observe as a district. But that'll be a future. Right now, it's just the regents that are in front of you today. And so, Mr. President, I would ask that you take action on approving the revised calendar.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the revised 2020-2021 district calendar?
So moved.
So moved by, was that Tom? I'm sorry, or
Andrew.
Andrew, sorry, Andrew. Second? Second by Leslie. Okay, is there any discussion? There being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor, so signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, President Chimera. And our next action item, I'm going to ask Mr. Richards to give a quick high-level synopsis of the memorandum of agreement that I will bring before you in a moment as an action item.
Good evening, everybody. I have two actually MOAs to present, and we'll start with the first one. Both are with the KTSEA. The one recognizes the difficulty we constantly have in securing bus drivers. So we've agreed with the KTSEA to essentially implement incentives very similar to what was in place a few years ago to hire and recruit new drivers. And so that's ultimately the MOA. I'd like to recommend to the Superintendent Samato request approval on that action item as presented.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Richards. And just a side note, congratulations to Mr. Nestico and Ms. Morosco for all their work that they've been doing with the department with transportation as well. It's been really great effort. So, Mr. President, I bring before you for action item, I recommend the memorandum of agreement.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement for the KTSEA hiring incentives?
So moved.
So moved by Jen.
Mhm.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Leslie. Any discussion? There being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you, President Chimera. And our next section here is Miss White with Instructional Services, and Miss White did have an emergency this evening, so I excused her. Well, there is another MOA. I apologize. Gina just ran into the office to tell me. I'm sorry, Jeff. I know you mentioned that, but I thought it was coming up under your section. So, Jeff, I don't have it on my copy, and I don't have the digital copy in front of me. So, can you just bring that up, please?
Yeah, I'll describe it briefly. I know you're not used to HR speaking too much, so easily skipped over. The second item is a settlement to a grievance with the KTSEA over language that was in dispute with respect to promotions. We have secured clarifying language moving forward, and I'd like to recommend to the superintendent that you request action on that item as presented.
Okay, so Mr. President, I ask for the board to make that an action item, that memorandum of agreement.
Okay, do I have a motion? A motion to approve the memorandum of agreement?
So moved.
So moved by Andrew,
Second.
second by Tom. Any discussion? There being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carried unanimously.
Wonderful. So this next, what I started saying before is that I did excuse, and I hope that you understand and support, Miss White had an emergency this evening, so she was excused from the meeting. And her update, she did not have any, I believe, Lisa and Mike, correct, any presentation that was slated for this evening. So I'm going to suggest that we move right over to Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Ms. Morosco, and turn it over to you, Nicole.
Thank you, Superintendent. I have one item for a verbal report tonight, and that is an update on the status of the budget. Currently, we are working on review of some items. One thing that is happening tomorrow at after the principals meeting, I am sending out the building-based budget worksheets to them. I wanted to address them specifically at a principals meeting with them before I send them out, being a new face to them, and having that discussion on what my expectations are for their return. And we're currently reviewing the current year's projections for revenue and expenditures to determine where we are going to end up with a surplus or deficit, and trying to control spending currently with our current year's budget. That helps us look at what we can potentially fund as reserves or roll over into the next budget season, depending on where we are with state aid this year. We all know the state's current economic conditions are not well, and we're waiting on more guidance from them on that. So just reviewing all of those things at this time. One other thing that we're looking at is just the projected enrollment so that we can start to look at staffing levels for the next fiscal year. It's going to be interesting just because of the drop in enrollment, because of parents wanting students to be full-time and putting them into non-publics for those purposes. So we're reviewing that closely, and we will be ready for the next meeting. And at the next meeting, the 5-year financial plan update will be presented. So we will be ready for that as part of the budget and looking out to our financial status for 5 years. One other important thing that I've been reviewing is our capital project debt and in relationship to our tax cap and what that's going to look like in the next fiscal year. So that's one thing that ties right into our 5-year financial plan that's of importance. So we will be ready for a preliminary full budget at the February budget work session. That is all I have for the budget status. The other reports are informational only, and no report will be given on them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assistant Superintendent Marasco. Assistant Superintendent Richards, update.
Yeah, I don't have any update tonight, but I do want to point out a resolution that is on the consensus agenda. If you had any questions on the retention and disposition schedule, essentially in summary, it's a new retention schedule that consolidates all 4 previous retention schedules across the state for municipalities. So it's a standard, they've essentially standardized and made it all uniform now. And they did add a bunch of other stipulations now, but we're required to adopt that retention schedule effective January 1st. So if there's any questions, I can try to answer them tonight, or I'll be happy to get back to you if I can't answer them tonight. If not, and then that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jeff. One side note, folks, I am monitoring as I receive any questions just in case I can answer anything while we're on the board meeting. And I thought one that came up that I did see before we move on to the rest of the agenda, to go back to the presentation on reopening, I just want to clarify so that it is not confusing. This Monday is only elementary. We've done different things in the past where we start bringing back special classes at other grade levels. We are not doing that in this round. We have elementary, everything and everybody that is elementary will be coming back this Monday. Some things that were in the presentation, just to clarify, President Chimera, is all of our elementaries. Now we will have our special classes coming at the elementary 4 days a week, correct, Mr. Muscarella? And our beginner and tell me the ENL groups that will also be 4 days a week. It's a handful of our students.
Entering and emerging.
Entering and emerging ELA or ELL students, ENL students at the elementary level. Only at the elementary level start this Monday. Secondary start after the recess, after the break, January 4th. And that's our special classes and our L's. So no one from secondary is starting this Monday, only elementary. Sorry about that, President Chimera, but I thought that was worth the clarifier to make sure that all families understood that.
Yes, thank you.
And that concludes my update and cabinet's update. Now I put in front of you the consensus agenda so that you can move on consensus.
Okay, are there any requests to withdraw specific items from consensus?
Yes, I'd like to withdraw item F, the surplus list, please.
Okay, so then do I have a motion to approve the consensus agenda excluding item F, surplus list?
So moved.
We'll move by Amy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jen. Any discussion? All right, there being none, I call for a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. All right, do I have a motion to approve item F surplus list that was withdrawn from the consensus agenda?
So moved.
So moved by Andrew. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Leslie. And any discussion?
Yes, when I looked at the surplus list, I noticed that there are 8 boxes of Lucy Calkins ELA materials from Lindbergh that are designated as being surplus. And they're described as being in good condition. They're, I guess, curriculum guides and Calkins units of study kits. And I know that in the past, we've sent a number of our ELA coaches to New York City to Lucy Calkins Columbia University Reading Workshop Institute, and they've brought back a lot of good ideas and that some teachers have implemented into their classes. Since then, of course, the district has adopted scholastic literacy for the ELA curriculum, and Calkins was, I think, in second place. But I was just wondering if some of those materials targeted for surplus might be worth keeping as teacher resource material for reference, and maybe could find a home at the Staff Development Center library, or maybe the ELA coaches could keep some of those, maybe not all 8 boxes, but extract some of them for teachers to sort through and borrow from, or maybe even, instead of disposing them all together, if there's a way to consider donating them to teacher education programs like at Buffalo State, or Dr. Rita Pollard, who is my partner in the district's after-school writing center, teaches at Niagara, and she teaches English education, and maybe she would have some use for them. So I just thought I'd ask about that.
Mr. Muscarella, do you mind just talking a little bit about those materials?
Sure. Most of the materials are actually copied materials placed in a binder. Years ago, Lucy Calkins made available an electronic download of the curricular plans, which now can be found online for free. At that point, they were $10 a download. And when I was the principal at Lindbergh, we actually downloaded those copies, paid for them. But unfortunately, they're back with the 2011 copyright. All the newer materials are from 2015 and 16. So those materials that are in the binders, the number 26, which I believe is on the surplus, was the number of teachers that the materials were copied from. So most of these materials in the boxes are outdated. Newer material is available. She's always updating her work, and multiple updates have been made available, especially in 15 and 16. So at this point, those materials are no longer needed in the district. We do have some updated copies that we are holding on to at the district level. Our teachers, we did collect the materials, but we do have some updated copies in our resources that our coaches do have. So at this time, I would be recommending that we surplus those items, since they are from the 2011 edition, and the information is readily available for download now for free.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I didn't know, the date of the editions of the units of study. Couldn't tell that from the list. So if it's fairly obsolete, then, and most of the material is available online, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. Thanks, Doctor. Matt, does that, I could turn it back over to you now, I think?
Yeah, I think we need to call for a vote on that item F, right? Surplus. All those in favor of approving that surplus? So, I'm sorry, so signify with aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carried unanimously. All right, moving on to item 12. 12A is our tenure acknowledgements. I don't believe we have any this month, right?
And no, thank you, President Chimera. Right, Gina, I don't believe that we have any tenure recommendations this month. Jeff, none this month, correct? No, okay, no, we can move on.
Okay, moving on to item 13. It's our moment of silence for those in the Kenton community who have passed away. Last month, we introduced this new policy of taking a moment of silence to recognize any Kenton community member or family member who have passed away. Mr. Finelli sent a Google Doc to Kenton staff where names of staff or loved ones could be passed along and shared. We haven't received any specific names this month, but being our first month doing this, I thought it would be a good idea to take a moment of silence anyway for any Kenton community members or members that are or people that are near and dear to us who have passed. So let's take a moment of silence. Thank you. All right. Any other matters to bring up? No. Okay. We don't have any need for an executive session this evening. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved by Tom,
Second.
second by Andrew. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, so signify with aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. So we are adjourned. Everybody have a great holiday. We'll see you next month.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Good night.